Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, the war in Ukraine has spilled over the border, but who is responsible for the missiles that hit a Polish village, killing 2 people? US President Joe Biden says it might not be Russia. Amid fears things could escalate, we are live with the latest. A project to tag and track great white sharks follows a fatal attack on a teenager. All you might get for Christmas is COVID, with health officials forecasting up to 11,000 cases a day. So who needs a dose of therapy after that? Well, we've got you covered. Cute Animals, actual therapy professionals. Stay tuned. You can watch us Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Poland's government is appealing for calm after an explosion killed 2 people on the Ukrainian border. The Ukrainian government says it was caused by a Russian missile. Polish authorities say it was Russian-made, but they don't know who fired it. Here's the Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki.
Szanowni Państwo, drodzy rodacy, pracujemy również teraz.
We are investigating all causes of the incident with international experts who we have invited to join our team of specialists who have been at the scene of the incident for a few hours. We are increasing the combat readiness of some units in the country, especially concerning the monitoring of airspace in a reinforced way with our allies. We are also conducting enhanced analysis with our allies regarding the potential use of Article 4 that triggers consultations within the framework of the North Atlantic Pact.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is stressing that world leaders are being cautious in their response to the missile strike. Speaking from Vietnam, Ms Ardern says people should take heart in that.
We have leaders at present, major leaders in the G20 convened. All of that is helpful at this time of heightened pressure, heightened anxiety, heightened tension.
Jacinda Ardern says NATO is working to establish what's happened. She reiterated her call for the war in Ukraine to end. The Ministry of Health is dishing out advice for how to stay safe at Christmas parties, with modelling suggesting COVID cases could peak at 11,000 a day next month. It stresses the slowly rising wave is very hard to predict, but it wants people to help keep it as low as possible. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
As people prepare to gather for Christmas parties, the ministry is telling them to open windows, or better yet, have their do outdoors. And it's urging the 1 million people who've not yet had a booster to get one as soon as they can. From Friday, Māori and Pacific people can get a second booster from the age of 40, 10 years younger than everybody else. That's because data shows they're much more likely to get seriously ill or die at a younger age.
Donald Trump has declared he'll run for office again in the 2024 US presidential election. The 76-year-old former president has told a few hundred supporters gathered at his Florida residence that together they would ensure President Biden wouldn't get 4 more years. Mr. Trump's announcement sets the stage for a bruising Republican nomination battle. Among several possible challenges is the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, who has just won a resounding election victory. Ministers are considering a request from the Health Ministry for more jobs to be added to an immigration fast track, but won't make any promises. A leaked briefing shows the Health Ministry last week asked for the green list to be extended to a further 30 professions, including paramedics and dentists. It urges action as soon as possible, warning of persisting workforce shortages. The Health Minister, Andrew Little, says he wants the best outcome for the health system.
We keep that under review. We look at the numbers every week, and we look at what is happening in the health sector generally.
The green list is due for a formal review mid-next year, but will likely be updated before then. And police have recovered almost $1 million worth of stolen goods as part of investigations into recent burglaries in Auckland and Northland. The recovered goods include a tractor, a luxury car, a truck and trailer, camper van, tools, agriculture equipment and chemicals used for the manufacture of methamphetamine. Police say the property was worth over $800,000. A 35-year-old Northland man is facing 26 charges, including burglary, theft and receiving stolen property. In sport, Black Caps captain Kane Williamson won't be stepping away from T20 cricket despite losing his Indian Premier League contract. Williamson's been dropped by Sunrisers Hyderabad after 8 seasons. He was their skipper and most expensive player this year, but has struggled for form recently in T20 cricket. Williamson still wants to be part of the competition and will put his name forward in the upcoming player auction.
That's the way it goes, and had a really enjoyable time at SRH, and the IPL's certainly an amazing comp to be a part of, and you see players play for different teams all the time. There's always a lot of options and a lot of cricket.
World Golf number 1, Rory McIlroy, says Live Golf CEO Greg Norman must step down as the sport needs an adult in the room to help end the ongoing feud. Live has lured away some of the PGA Tour's top players with huge sums of money, with those players now suspended from the PGA Tour, prompting lawsuits from both sides.
There's a few things that I would like to see on the Live side that needs to happen. I think Greg needs to go, exit stage left, and he's made his mark, but I think now's the right time to sort of say, look, you've got this thing off the ground, but no one's going to talk unless there's an adult in the room that can actually try to mend fences.
And Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag has reportedly told officials that Cristiano Ronaldo should never again play football for them. In a recent TV interview, Ronaldo claimed the club had betrayed him and that he's being forced out and has no respect for ten Hag. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, humans blasting into space, funding sources here and abroad for space entrepreneurs. Hands up. Where should we live when the coastlines creep inland? Crowd Science scours the globe for the best places. And a peanut butter baron has a new recipe book out. There'll be more in there than just peanut butter sandwiches, I expect. That's just for starters. On Nights with Karen Hay, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, and from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Partly cloudy, a few showers, thunderstorms and downpours possible in the afternoons and evenings. Horowhenua to Wellington, fine today, but isolated showers mainly about the ranges. Widespread showers from tomorrow afternoon, some heavy with thunderstorms inland. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Canterbury, partly cloudy. Isolated showers inland this afternoon and evening. A chance of thundery weather in Canterbury. Showers returning tomorrow morning, some heavy with thunderstorms possible inland. For Westland, areas of cloud, a few showers south of the glaciers today. Isolated showers tomorrow, some heavy inland with thunderstorms possible there. Otago, Fiordland and Southland, occasional rain or showers. Some heavy falls during the afternoons and evenings with a chance of thunderstorms inland. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, low cloud and a few showers. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 5:20.
Ngā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. World leaders are in crisis talks after the war in Ukraine spilled over the border to neighbouring Poland with fatal consequences. But early information suggests that it may not have been caused by a missile fired from Russia, according to US President Joe Biden. 2 people have been killed after the missiles landed near the Polish town of Przewidów, just kilometres from the Ukraine border. Russia has strenuously denied it is responsible. Here's CNN's Matthew Chance a short time ago.
Well, dramatic scenes taking place here in this relatively remote village close to the border of Ukraine on Polish territory, where the Polish authorities have confirmed 2 people killed in that explosion caused by rockets or missiles that fell on Polish territory earlier at a farm just a short distance from here. It's a one-street town, essentially, and that street has been sealed off all night by the Polish authorities, preventing us from actually getting to the scene because they've got specialists on the ground there literally trying to piece together the fragments of the ordnance to try and work out where it's from and who fired it. The Polish authorities have come out and said it's a Russian-made missile, but of course it doesn't necessarily mean it was fired by Russia. Ukrainian military forces also have missiles that were originally made by Russia. Some of their anti-aircraft missiles, for instance, fall into that category. What we do know is that 2 people have been killed, and that's caused enormous trauma to the local community here, which is obviously very small and very close-knit. There were farm workers working on that farm a short distance from here when the explosions took place. We also know that the Poles are pointing the finger of blame to a certain extent directly at Moscow already, calling the Russian ambassador into the foreign ministry here for consultations, and again designating this ordnance as Russian-made. The Russians, for their part, have categorically denied involvement. The Kremlin telling me that they've got no information on any Russian military strike on territory of Poland, and the Russian Defence Ministry issuing a statement saying it's a provocation to suggest this is a Russian attack. And so still some questions about what's taken place here, but in the hours ahead there will be a response from Poland and its NATO allies.
That's CNN's Matthew Chance, and there has been a response. The situation is escalating. Global leaders gathering at the G20 summit in Bali have held an emergency closed-door meeting. Speaking to the media in the last few hours, US President Joe Biden cast doubt on claims the missiles were fired from Russia.
There is preliminary information that contests that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it is. It's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia, but we'll see. We support Ukraine fully in this moment, and we have since the start of this conflict. We're going to continue to do whatever it takes to give them the capacity to defend themselves.
If Russia is to blame, it could trigger the NATO Collective Defence Pact, known as Article 5, which means an attack on any of its members is considered an attack on all. The BBC's Jonathan Head joins us now from Bali, where the issue has dominated talks between world leaders at the G20 summit. Kia ora, Jonathan. I imagine that has turned into a surrogate NATO meeting. What's been happening there?
Well, bits of it have. I mean, remember, there are 20 members here, and of course, host Indonesia had wanted this summit to talk about a great many other issues that are absolutely critical, particularly for big countries like Indonesia. The economic situation, climate change. Inevitably, Ukraine has dominated, and this attack has meant that the leaders allied to NATO or in the NATO alliance or in the group of seven, the G7 leaders, have kind of taken themselves off the official schedule, which was supposed to include going out to plant mangrove trees with Indonesian President Joko Widodo. And instead, they've had this gathering, this huddle, as they call it, a roundtable meeting to discuss what to do. Now, they're being pretty cautious. Nobody's saying anything until they've got better information about what they need to read into this missile attack or this missile strike in Poland. And as you heard there from President Biden, I think they're still very unclear about who fired the missile, where it came from. So nobody's going to start talking about what response is relevant yet until they've got a lot more information. And I think that will take some time. In fact, by the time we really know all the full facts, most of these leaders are likely to be leaving. I mean, President Biden is actually due to leave just within the next couple of hours. So I don't imagine we'll get any response from here. It has been a distraction, but that's been the theme of this entire summit. It's the first G20 gathering, the first big gathering of leaders face-to-face since the COVID pandemic, but the first meeting since the invasion of Ukraine. And try, as some other countries have, to try and get the focus on other very important issues, Ukraine has simply dominated, mostly because the US and its allies have insisted that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is such an egregious act, there has to be collective action, and that it also is causing enormous problems on the other issues that bother people here, like food and energy security.
How would you describe the mood? Because it is absolutely critical that they get this right. So, is it cautious?
It is cautious, yeah. I mean, look, it's far too early to know, was this a Russian missile that got knocked off course? Was it accidental? I mean, it's a long way inside Polish territory. It doesn't seem like you'd get that wrong. Who fired it where? There's too much yet to be decided. And the other thing to be aware of is, look, at this meeting, of course, Russia was represented. The Russian foreign minister came instead of Vladimir Putin. He left last night. But we've got Chinese leader Xi Jinping here. All these big countries saying caution is essential. The one theme that's come out is, we have to end the war in Ukraine. There's quite a lot of disagreement about how that should be done, but that's certainly a vital goal for everyone. And also, we can't slide either into a new Cold War or risk a nuclear war. All of those things are weighing on the minds of these leaders, so they have to be extremely careful.
Any mention of whether Poland has asked officially for assistance and what form that might come in?
None at all yet. And again, I think that's far too early. I mean, the provisions of NATO, of course, allow for military support for Poland if it asks for it. But there's a lot of parameters there to be discussed. A lot of leaders, including President Biden, have been on the phone to the Polish Prime Minister, but they're not giving anything away at this stage. And I think that's understandable. Even the Polish authorities are not yet sure exactly what the source of this missile is.
Thank you for your time this evening. That is the BBC's Jonathan Head, live from Bali, where the G20 talks are going ahead. But obviously the situation in Ukraine has dominated talks between some of those world leaders. It is almost 5:15. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A tray of rat tests could be passed around with the nibbles and bubbly at Christmas parties this year. The Ministry of Health is finalising its official advice for the festive season as COVID case numbers stubbornly rise again. Health officials say the current wave could peak at as many as 11,000 cases a day in December. Māori and Pacifica people are now eligible for a second booster from age 40, and anyone who is due theirs is being urged to get one before the holidays. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
Christmas parties could have an unwelcome visitor this year, but Public Health Deputy Director Andrew Auld has a plan for how to stop COVID settling in.
If hosting events, open windows and doors to ensure good ventilation, or where possible, and hopefully if the summer is a good one, we'll be able to have lots of our events outdoors.
The Ministry of Health will eventually put out a summer checklist on how to stay healthy in the festive season, with the recommendation to take a rat before a big party, one thing being considered. In the meantime, the head of the government's vaccination advisory group, Ian Town, has a suggestion ready to go. He wants the million people who've not yet had their first booster to join the 2.75 million who have.
The key thing as we get ready for summer is to just give that a real boost for the boosters.
Andrew Auld says a bump in vaccination could soften the peak.
The model shows daily cases could rise to a level similar to our peak in July, about between 10 and 11,000 cases per day. Daily COVID-19 hospital admissions could, under these assumptions, peak at just over 100 admissions per day, again slightly higher than the midwinter July peak.
He stresses the wave is very difficult to predict, with the modelling just a suggestion. That's partly because there's a swarm of variants in the country and it's hard to know what they'll do. Old waves used to be driven by one variant, but that may be about to change.
What seems to be the case occurring now in multiple countries around the world is, rather than a single variant becoming dominant, a number of variants, often closely related, are starting to sort of compete for dominance.
Ian Town says the decision to lower the second booster vaccination age for Māori and Pacific people is based on New Zealand-specific data, which is much better than the overseas data they used to rely on.
The risk of death from COVID-19 is around twice for Māori and Pacific people, and that risk kicks in earlier, around the age of 40, which is why our recommendation has been made as I've announced.
The health bosses say they worry about the pressure on hospitals and health services from another wave when they're already hugely stretched. They're urging people to do what they can to help and to keep themselves safe. That includes making a plan for what to do if you get COVID on holiday and making sure you pack masks, rats and sanitiser in your luggage.
Let us know what you think about that. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, forecasting potentially 11,000 cases a day during December. Merry Christmas, everybody. Health officials are pleading with their minister for more jobs to be put on an immigration fast track as soon as possible due to desperate workforce shortages. The Health Ministry's appeal was made public today after being leaked to the opposition ACT party. The government says it's considering the request but won't make any commitments. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Stretched and stressed, a health sector in crisis. Prudence Thompson is a health recruiter. She says the workforce is in dire need.
Patients are having to wait longer to be seen, surgeries are being cancelled, nurses, doctors and allied health are absolutely exhausted, and we do need the support of overseas migrants.
A newly leaked document shows the Health Ministry agrees. It too worried by what it calls persisting workforce shortages. Just last week, it sent its minister a list of 30 jobs, pleading for them to be added to the immigration green list at the nearest opportunity. The jobs include paramedics, nurse practitioners, dentists, pharmacists and physiotherapists. These professions are reliant on the international workforce, it says, and there is a risk to the delivery of health services without a streamlined route to enter. That advice was leaked to the ACT Party. Its deputy, Brooke Van Velden, says the government must not drag its feet any longer.
Andrew Little needs to go straight to his colleagues in Cabinet and ask them to approve those health professionals on that list tomorrow so that we can get these workers through the borders.
Everybody wants to do everything that possibly can be done so we can fill the vacancies that we've got.
The Health Minister, Andrew Little, has seen the advice. He says he, as well as the Immigration Minister, Michael Wood, are constantly reviewing the green list. They're open to changes, he says, but no promises.
We keep that under review. We look at the numbers every week.
No commitments at this point. I need to receive advice on these matters.
Michael Wood says he is frequently lobbied by various sectors for special treatment and needs to consider their claims carefully.
I don't say this with any disrespect, but my job is not just to take that at face value. My job is to make sure I get good advice and have consistent and fair settings across all different groups. But it's not something that I intend to leave lying around forever and a day.
Prudence Thompson says ministers cannot move quickly enough.
They said that they put together this green list very quickly, so if they can put it together quickly, they can change it quickly.
We need workers and we need them through the border now.
The green list in total is due for a formal review mid-next year, but ministers will need to move much quicker than that if they're to keep even their own officials on side.
Craig McCulloch reporting, and it is 5:20. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. What do you think about COVID for Christmas and the numbers being forecast, potentially 11,000 cases a day over the Christmas period? Are you going to take any particular precautions? Let us know your thoughts. Are you going to stay away from parties in the party season? Also, the call there for more medical professionals to be put on that fast-track immigration list. Share your thoughts with us. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now. Ko Evi anō tēnei.
The United States and its NATO allies are investigating the blast that killed 2 people in Poland, but early information suggests it may not have been caused by a missile fired from Russia, according to US President Joe Biden. Donald Trump has announced he's running for the 2024 US presidency. He described the US as a nation in decline in a speech at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. There's a long road ahead before the Republican nominee is formally selected, with the first state-level contests more than a year away. The Immunisation Advisory Centre says access to the meningococcal B vaccine is too inequitable and is leaving Māori and Pacific communities vulnerable. Pharmac is considering expanding access to the vaccine, which would allow it to be included in the childhood immunisation schedule. From today, a judge will be able to prohibit high-risk offenders from accessing, being around or using firearms. Deputy Police Commissioner Jevon McSkimming says firearm prohibition orders are a new tool to help keep communities safe from firearm violence. And the Immigration Minister is considering a request from health officials for more jobs to be added to an immigration fast track, but won't make any promises. A leaked briefing shows the Health Ministry last week asked for the green list to be extended to a further 30 professions, including paramedics and dentists. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, there are reports of a crash on State Highway 1 south of Taupo near Waitahanui. Please follow directions from the emergency services that are on site there. Our next news headlines and traffic are at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. The Black Caps captain, Kane Williamson, has lost his lucrative Indian Premier League contract after some poor form in T20 cricket. Williamson was the Sunrisers Hyderabad captain and most expensive player last season, getting paid just under $3 million. Speaking in Wellington today, Williamson said he was told a couple of days ago he was being let go, but still wants to be part of T20 competitions.
There's a lot of competitions around the world, and the IPL's certainly an amazing comp to be a part of, and you see players play for different teams all the time. There's always a lot of options and a lot of cricket, so for me I love playing all formats.
And we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Sounds brutal, but given his history in the IPL, is anyone going to want him?
Has had 8 years with the Sunrisers Hyderabad, so they picked him up quite cheaply back in 2015. Well, relatively cheaply, less than that nearly $3 million. And over that time that he's been with the team, the money that he's been getting has been increasing, and the pressure on him as an overseas player has been increasing as well. So he saw firsthand how kind of cutthroat the IPL is last season. He stepped in to be captain of the Sunrisers, and that was taking over from Australia's David Warner. So Warner's form had been a bit bad in itself, and the team were 5 losses from 6 games. So they were struggling in the competition as they wanted to bring in Williamson into that sort of skipper role to maybe try and rejuvenate the team. That didn't happen. They finished 8 out of the 10 IPL teams. So that's, I guess, given a lot of the reason as to why these decisions are being made now. They are wanting to get back into the top of this IPL competition. It's quite a tough competition. So, and it's also Kane Williamson's personal form slump. So this is before this year. He had a batting average of 36 and a strike rate of just over 126. And in this last year's competition, he was averaging less than 20 runs at a strike rate of under 100. So that's not particularly appealing to those other teams.
I wonder what that does to your price then. If you're getting paid just under $3 million, I wonder, every run you drop or down in your average, how much does that take off the bill? It's going to be interesting.
So he's going to go into that player auction, and so he is going to have to take a pay cut. There's a player auction next month which will allow any of the other 9 teams to pick him up, or the Sunrisers could get a cheap bargain, get him back, buy him back again at a lot less than that $3 million.
Well, that would be an interesting move, wouldn't it? And have any other New Zealand players been dropped as well?
Yeah, there are 4 other players in a similar situation. So that's Daryl Mitchell and Jimmy Neesham have been let go from the Rajasthan Royals. The Delhi Capitals have dropped Tim Seifert. The Chennai Super Kings have released Adam Milne. But there are still 7 New Zealanders in that competition, including 2 that we talked about yesterday. So Trent Boult is with the Rajasthan Royals and Finn Allen with the Royal Challengers Bangalore.
OK, let's move on to basketball. What's the big announcement today?
So Melbourne United Australian basketball forward Isaac Humphries has told his teammates this morning that he is gay. It was the significance of the announcement is that he's the only openly gay male professional basketball player in a top competition in the world. So that's currently playing. There was one other NBA player back in 2013, Jason Collins, who also came out at that point. But Humphries has played around the world, and this has reverberated around the world. So he played for the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA, and he went to college in America as well. So it's that type of thing that's actually made a bit of an impression, because he wrote a opinion piece that ran on CNN today. So the New Zealand Breakers are also part of this people around the world that are supporting Humphries. They've said on their social media today, "We support everyone's right to be themselves without judgment. Sport should be for everyone, and we're proud to be part of a league that celebrates diversity in every form." And echoed, I guess, along with that as well, is Melbourne United CEO Nick Truson has said the club was proud of Humphries and that it was a momentous occasion for the player personally, but also for male sport on a global scale.
Pretty cool. Thank you, Felicity. That is Felicity Reid with Sport. More nursing students have come forward with concerning stories about their degrees and clinical placements. Dozens of AUT nursing students have contacted Checkpoint sharing harrowing experiences of their final year of study. Some describe driving long distances to unpaid hospital placements, having to cover the cost of petrol, uniforms and food. The Health Minister Andrew Little told Checkpoint he'll consider payment for third-year nursing students. Some nursing lecturers say the number of students graduating their degrees and entering the stretched workforce won't improve without greater financial support. Tom Taylor has the story, and some names in his report have been changed.
Second-year AUT student Olivia knew she wanted to become a nurse since early in high school. After a challenging couple of years studying, she's still determined to pursue the profession, but definitely won't be staying in New Zealand post-study.
Some of the nurses and healthcare assistants, they are the hardest working people you see, and they just continually get not prioritised. I've had enough of it.
The nursing degree at AUT is full-time, and the university says it's challenging to have so many students fitting study around other work. But throughout her degree, Olivia's worked 3 jobs just to support herself and pay for the petrol, parking and uniforms she needs for her clinical placements. With a student loan of $30,000 and 1 year to go, she says cutting down her hours isn't an option.
When I'm not on placement, I'm basically putting myself down for as many hours as I can at all of these jobs to try and earn enough money to be able to save to pay back my student loan, pay for my rent, support myself throughout my placement.
Olivia says when students raise concerns about their workload, the response from AUT hasn't done anything to reassure them.
It's a constant battle. Nobody listens to what you have to say. And if they do, it's normally met with pretty belittling arguments, such as, oh, well, you expected that when you signed up for nursing, or, this is what nursing is. Harden up.
In a statement, AUT says it provides support for its students, but says the students who've shared their stories with Checkpoint in recent weeks haven't used opportunities to engage with staff, such as monthly meetings with program leaders. AUT says its nursing tutors and head of school are arranging a meeting with students to work through their concerns and discuss potential improvements to the way it communicates. Registered nurse Susan worked as a clinical tutor at another nursing school for 1 year. She says she only lasted that long because she couldn't bear the pressure students were put under.
There were some students who were bullied in placements and in fact had to withdraw students from that placement because they were being shouted at.
Susan says nursing schools don't understand the immense workload they're putting on students during placements, still expecting them to prepare for exams and complete assignments, with zero tolerance for late work. She says the system has to change, with more alignment needed between the academic side of study and clinical work. But most importantly, Susan says students need to be paid for their work on placement.
I understand that workloads are very heavy in public hospitals, but that is no excuse for exploiting people.
Pippi Barton is a senior nurse lecturer at Northland Polytechnic and a PhD student researching strategies to grow the Māori nursing workforce. She's been interviewing students across New Zealand and says economic hardship is their number one issue.
Economic hardship's not just an issue for Māori, it's for all the nursing students. It's just so hard for them these days.
She says the high rate of attrition among nursing students is linked to the financial struggles they face throughout their degrees. Health Minister Andrew Little told Checkpoint nursing students should get some form of support during their final third-year placements. How much and by when are details he can't yet commit to.
And that was Tom Taylor reporting 29 minutes to 6. Some of you getting in touch about the forecasts for COVID cases over December, potentially 11,000 a day. Gary says we should have stayed with the alert level settings. And this one from Judith, too weak, don't suggest or recommend, require, Judith says, underlined, masks indoors and on public transport. No biggie. Rats pre-event is also a good idea, and I have been doing that already. Good on you, Judith. Kia amo tonu mai, do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoe e nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Contact Energy. Now, it's come out strongly against a government proposal to convert Lake Onslow into a power storage facility. Why?
Well, Lake Onslow's in central Otago, and the idea is that you would leave some of the water in the lake, which would act as sort of a battery storage in those dry years. So you'd have a backup supply of hydro water. Except that they would cost, according to the study that they're doing right now, would be a multi-billion-dollar scheme to build. And Contact had their annual meeting today. Now, they're not the first company that have sort of said, hey, gently to the government, this might not be a good idea. But this wasn't so gentle. They came right out and said, forget it. This is not the best way to manage dry years. And we have way better ideas than that. We can use technology, smaller, less expensive cost projects. And mostly they've just referred to a report that came out by the Boston Consulting Group that estimated the cost to get to 100% renewable energy. This isn't just the generation, but the transmission and distribution as well. $42 billion. And Contact is saying, listen, we know better than you, government, on how to do this. So just let us do it and just don't interfere. Thank you very much. There you go.
KMD Brands, and the acronym is?
Well, KMD is the new company name for the company that used to be known as Kathmandu, which is the retailer, as well as the owner of Obos, which makes shoes, and Riptide, which is like surfing gear.
Yeah.
So they decided to call their company KMD because they have all these brands, and Kathmandu doesn't quite work, so that's what they've decided to do. That was not so, I guess that was it earlier this year? Well, it was sometime before now.
So they've got a strong first quarter, Nona.
Unbelievably strong. Their quarter sales are up 62% on the year earlier. Keeping in mind, of course, the year earlier last year. We were in lockdown, not just here, but also in Australia, which are key markets for KMD. Never mind, though, that's still very strong. And they're saying that their first quarter their operating profit was nearly $30 million up on the same time the year earlier. So really good news for KMD, but almost did it, yep. But look, they're saying they're still a bit cautious because anything can happen. We just heard about COVID cases perhaps going up. Who knows? They're saying that they're also concerned about high inflation, consumer sentiment. So they're not counting all of their, eggs or chickens, whichever comes first.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other debate.
Let's not go into that one.
Yeah.
But anyways, their share price rose 4.75% today. When you compare that to Contact Energy's just 2/3 of a percentage point up. And the overall index, it fell 9 points. So Kathmandu was a bit of a star today. So we finished up at 11,231 for the NZX Top 50. Kiwi dollar. Well, we got to 61.7 earlier today. We're currently at 61.4 US cents, 91 Australian and 51.6 British pence. And just so anybody else knows, no one really cared about Donald Trump's presidential bid. So that didn't happen. Nothing happened in the market as a result. Well, for now.
For now. Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News there. And speaking of Donald Trump has confirmed he's making another bid for the White House in 2024. He made the announcement during a speech at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. World Watch's Phil Vine has more.
Standing before a crowd of supporters, and despite being urged not to do it, he threw his hat firmly into the ring.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Several of the candidates he endorsed in the midterm elections lost, and key members of the Republican Party told him not to run. The former president painting his last term in the White House as a time of peace and prosperity.
The world was at peace. America was prospering, and our country was on track for an amazing future because I made big promises to the American people, and unlike other presidents, I kept my promises. I kept them.
He talked about Joe Biden's presidency in dystopian terms.
We were a great and glorious nation, something you haven't heard for quite a long period of time. We were a strong nation, and importantly, we were a free nation. But now we are a nation in decline. We are a failing nation. For millions of Americans, the past 2 years under Joe Biden have been a time of pain, hardship, anxiety, and despair.
Donald Trump has been blamed for the party's disappointing performance in the recent midterm elections, with a predicted red wave failing to materialise. Mr. Trump defended the Republican results, saying they just won back the House of Representatives.
Much criticism is being placed on the fact that the Republican Party should have done better, and frankly, much of this blame is correct. But the citizens of our country have not yet realized the full extent and gravity of the pain our nation is going through, and the total effect of the suffering is just starting to take hold.
The former president derided Joe Biden's foreign policy. Donald Trump now claims he never would have withdrawn from Afghanistan, and if he'd been president, there wouldn't have been a war in Ukraine.
Our enemies are speaking of us with scorn and laughter and derision because of those two events. But there are many more. Even just today, a missile was sent in, probably by Russia, to Poland, 50 miles into Poland. And people are going absolutely wild and crazy, and they're not happy. They are very, very angry.
Donald Trump has a massive campaign war chest and remains hugely popular with the Republican base. Whether he can revive the wider popularity that saw him elected once is a different question.
Donald Trump there announcing he's going to run for the presidency again. It is 22 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A number of you getting in touch about the COVID case numbers, what to do over the Christmas break. Maureen says, open windows? Wear a bloody mask. Do it to save us all, says Maureen. Another listener says, an etiquette note for Christmas party planners, as every responsible host knows, the rat tests on a tray is traditionally passed around before the nibbles and bubbly, clockwise or anti-clockwise as you please, but at least 15 minutes before the festivities begin. Safety first. On the subject of a lack of nursing professionals and other health professionals. This listener says Andrew Little is a Minister of Health in denial. By the time he realises the terminal nature of the health workforce situation, it will be too late. On fast-tracking workers, health workers from overseas, this fast-track medical workers immigrating from where? Everywhere has a shortage of medical workers. We need free nursing degrees and apprenticeships. Another says support expanding the visas for all healthcare professionals, but I'm also dubious about exactly where these folks will be coming from. Other countries we traditionally get our overseas health professionals from are struggling too. Acting like there is an endless resource of folks from overseas is naive. Another, it's really hard for allied health workers too. I'm doing a postgraduate qualification to become registered in my field of social work. I can't afford to study full-time. I'm dreading when I'm on placement. It's a 50-day placement. That's 10 weeks where I'm basically unable to work. That's in reference to Year 3 students, nursing students who don't get paid on their placements. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie standing by with the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. NATO and G7 countries say they'll remain in close contact to decide any possible reaction to a blast caused by a rocket which fell in Poland and killed 2 people. The joint statement followed an emergency meeting held on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. Donald Trump, who has mounted relentless attacks on the integrity of the US voting since his 2020 election defeat, has launched a bid to regain the presidency in 2024. Mr. Trump laid out familiar themes in his speech, denouncing migrants and portraying American cities as crime-ridden cesspools of blood. A health recruiter is urging ministers to act quickly to expand its immigration fast-track for the sector. A leaked briefing shows the Health Ministry last week asked for the green list to be extended to a further 30 professions, including paramedics and dentists. Health officials say COVID-19 case numbers appear to have plateaued, but a complex mix of variants could see daily cases hit 11,000 again over the summer. COVID-19 cases in New Zealand have been rising and yesterday topped 4,000 for the first time since August. And a Whakatane high schooler is calling on authorities to change the name of the road where the Russian embassy in New Zealand is located. 14-year-old Jasper House has written to Wellington leaders asking them to rename part of Messines Road in Karori to Vladimir Zelensky Way after the Ukrainian president. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, because of a serious crash just south of Taupo, State Highway 1 is closed northbound between Mahuta and Tawha roads. There's a short detour for northbound traffic via Mahuta Road. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Evie. Central New South Wales is drowning under a deluge that's been going on for weeks with no signs of it drying out anytime soon. In the small rural town of Ugora, one person has died and another is still missing. Other locals describe the town being hit by a tsunami-like wave of water. A majority of homes and businesses in the town of Forbes have been inundated for the second time in as many weeks, and the river hasn't peaked yet. Even with all the warnings and sandbagging, people have been caught out. 14 people were rescued from the roof of the local pub overnight. Phyllis Miller is the mayor of Forbes and joins us now. Phyllis, you must be so over this.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. We thought we'd done all the backbone work of cleaning up after the last one, and we're back into it again. But that's life when you live on a floodplain.
So what is the latest?
The latest is we're still waiting for our peak. We've still got lots and lots of water going through our CBD and inundating homes and businesses. And we are just patiently waiting for the water to get to Forbes.
So what happened with all the people on the pub last night?
What happened, that was in a motel, and the water's come up very quickly. It was amazing. And we had people in the motel, and we realised that we had to evacuate them. So SES and Fire and Rescue evacuated 8 people out of the motel, and then there was another family home across the road from it that they evacuated them too.
So have people got out of town, or are they staying there and sandbagging, or what's happening?
A lot of people who have had to leave their homes have got family and friends that they go to. We've got an evacuation centre, which we've had about 60-odd people registered there. A lot of them find alternate accommodation, or we put them up in motels. The difficulty when people leave their homes, a lot of the times they've got pets too, so we've got to try and house the pets. So it's a pretty logistic operation in evacuating people.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And given the work that's being done with the sandbagging and I imagine people raising their furniture up and all the rest of it, are you going to be able to save much, or are you expecting this to do some serious damage?
Oh, there'll be serious damage. There's no two ways about it. Like after the last one, the damage and what I saw out on our footpaths when people were doing the clean-up, there were fridges, there were washing machines, dryers, lounges, so many things. And I think we'll get more of the same when the water goes and people go and look at their homes. I think we're going to get more of that devastation.
How are people coping mentally?
I think we're a pretty tough mob out here. That's why we live out in rural regional New South Wales. I think this is testing a lot of people, certainly testing our farmers. They've been in flood for 4 months out in the farming districts. They've been isolated. They've lost all their crops. They've lost stock. And then, of course, all the people in town, all the residents that have been badly affected. I think it's going to have its toll on people, and I think it's something as a local government we need to be really mindful about and make sure that we've got the services there to accommodate those people.
Are you getting enough help?
I think so. I think we're being treated fairly, and we had the acting Prime Minister here today, Richard Marles, and he certainly got first-hand knowledge of what we're going through out here. So I think I actually am very pleased with the way that we're being treated by both state and federal government.
So this is only part of it, right? When you get over the rush of water and all the rest of it, then you got the damage to contend with. Are you ready for that?
I think that's the big thing. We've actually had words with the acting Prime Minister today to make sure that we get categorised as a Category D area for damage. And
is that the most serious, Phyllis? Or
yes, it is. And we need to make sure that there's some kind of packages in place for small business as well as the farming community and people that have lost everything they own. You were talking about Eugowra. I heard your lead-in to interviewing me, which is a community of interest to us, not in my shire, but the people that live there. A lot of them come to Forbes, work in Forbes. A lot of their children live in Forbes. And that was a very sad situation out there where they got flash flooding through a creek, and it was all due to localised rain. And the damage it's done, it's torn houses off their footings, and they're floating down the rivers. It's terrible.
Yeah, the pictures are just incredible. Hey, while I've been talking to you, Phyllis, someone has messaged, just curious about whether you have a problem with the warmer weather and the floodwaters around. Do you get mosquitoes and other issues related to that?
We certainly do, and prior to, it's very cold here today for some very, very silly reason, but just before we got flooded again, we had been doing mosquito spraying, and we also have pellets that we put in still water that kills the larva. So we've been working on that, and as soon as we start to go into recovery mode, we will start to do that mosquito spraying. We've got chooks, and we actually do blood tests on those chooks, and we also trap mosquitoes, and we send them off for testing so that we can know whether we've got Japanese encephalitis or whether we've got Ross River fever or anything like that. At this point in time, we're still testing and we haven't got anything at the moment. But we'll continue to do that over the summer months.
Thank you so much for your time, Phyllis, because you've got your hands filled there. That's Phyllis Miller, who's the Mayor of Forbes, facing torrential rain and flooding. It is 12 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A coroner's recommended more research on great white sharks to reduce the risk of future attacks following a fatal mauling on Waihi Beach last year. 19-year-old Kayla Marlowe died of cardiovascular shock due to a massive blood loss caused by a single shark bite to her right leg while she was swimming at the southern Bowen Town end of the beach. Her friends had gone back to shore, and lifeguards concerned that Kayla was out too far were already heading out to check on her when the attack happened. Coroner Michael Robb made several recommendations, including a tagging and satellite monitoring program for great whites in the North Island, while acknowledging funding is an issue. Marine biologist and shark scientist Dr. Riley Elliott gave advice to the coroner and is now basically crowdfunding tagging research.
In order to understand potential risk, which is the interest of the coroner, we need to understand what is risky. And in this instance, that is the great white sharks. And it's because it's novel in this northeast region of the North Island. We haven't really had historically, large numbers of great white sharks. But over the last 3 summers, they've been persistent and been in the dozens. And clearly through history, we've had a tragic fatality of a young woman, and the following summer, 2 great whites killed in set nets in the same location. So there's obviously concern there. And to alleviate that, I've worked on projects in New South Wales and California and South Africa. And how you do that is you provide the public with information of where these sharks are, what they're doing, and how that overlaps with our recreation. And the way you do that in shark science is you tag sharks with satellite tags, which provides location and behaviour information.
Why are there more of them around that area? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I like how you put feeling, because science gives the answers and we haven't done the science yet. But with a permit now to do that and commencing from the 1st of December, it's going to give us insight as to who's actually there as far as sharks go, where they came from, what their genetic background is, the migratory, the behaviours. But if you look at it from a marine biology background, basically we've got a few variables, which is conservation success, because we have protected the great white for a few decades now and we should expect increasing numbers. We've also had shifts in warming waters, with La Nina especially affecting New Zealand, pushing warmer water south. And the nursery ground for the great white shark is in shallow coastal harbour inlets, which provide ample small food and a safe haven away from, to be honest, their mums and dads, which may prey on them. So you've got 2 variables there. Warm water doesn't make a magical increase in sharks. What it does is shift distribution. And Southeast Australia has been a stronghold for many years as far as juvenile populations. And with that warming water coming down, our northeastern harbours could be much more appealing for them as a nursery. We've always had nurseries in the west coast harbours like the Kaipara, but historically not so much in what is the hotspot at the moment, which is Tauranga Harbour. But I guess that reflects, the fact that Tauranga Harbour is probably in really, really good health, because that's what sharks are an indicator of.
So the coroner has acknowledged in making this recommendation that it takes money. So in order to have a tagging and tracking program that provides the information we need, how much do you reckon it's going to cost? And have you got the money to do that?
Short answer is I've learnt from previous work in this realm, which was through my PhD, satellite tagging blue sharks in order to help understand their biology, but also stop shark finning in New Zealand. And because the funding doesn't really exist in New Zealand for megafauna, because most marine science is funded by fisheries, for fisheries, I went to the New Zealand public. I utilised yourselves, the media, to share the science I was trying to endeavour to do, and a call to the public to help support it. And a model I learned that worked well was you enable people to sponsor tags, i.e. sponsor a shark, name that shark, and allow that tracking information to be shared with the public. And so this year, that's what I put out there to the public, having my permit now. And it's been taken on with huge success so far. There's been 8 out of the 20 permitted satellite tags sponsored so far, which is fantastic. And it is so appealing, these web apps which I've created called the Great White App, so people can follow these animals, make their own decisions based on information I provide, relative to the sharks' movements. But, ultimately there's much more to a project like this through long term that requires, investment by government. And this year we're doing the National Plan of Action for Sharks review. And in that document, there was a big push for we need to throw funding at stuff like this, because otherwise how's it going to happen? But to be frank, I wasn't going to wait around for another summer to see bureaucracy move slowly. Instead, I used to use the analogy of America's Cup with a lot of New Zealanders chipping in little pieces to make something great. But that's kind of gone offshore these days, so I can't use it so much. But it is fantastic to see the uptick. I just got an email from a mother and her grandma who are swimmers and surfers, and they're sponsoring a tag because they want to know what's going on around them. So It's quite beautiful.
You mentioned the swimmers and the surfers, so we're almost out of time, but can you tell people, please, how best to protect themselves when they're swimming if they are concerned about sharks? Where should they be and when, and where shouldn't they be?
Yeah, look, the simple answer is don't overlap yourself with where sharks are feeding. And relative to this area, most interactions are off fishing boats, where fishermen are putting burley bags in the water, catching fish. The sharks are stealing those fish. So don't swim where people are fishing, and people who are fishing, please don't fish or dispose of fish products where people are swimming. At the end of the day, though, it is the ocean. We can't track all the sharks. We can't monitor them all the time. The best option you can do to recreate in the ocean is mitigate your risks in general. And the far bigger risk is drowning. So swim between the flags, get a Coast Guard membership, wear a life jacket.
And that's Dr. Riley Elliott. The coroner has also recommended elevated lifeguard towers, shark warning signs, and extending lifeguard powers so that they're able to clear people out of the ocean. St John's is scouting for more than 100 volunteers for a special program, and they're pretty fussy about who will qualify. For starters, they're assessed for their temperament and their ability to give unconditional love. The Therapy Pets program brings big rewards, but some areas of Aotearoa are currently missing out. Reporter Louise Tenuth and camera operator Marika Habazi joined one pet therapy session to see for themselves.
Once a week, Somerset Retirement Village in Karaka gains a four-legged resident.
You're my boy, aren't you? Aren't you my boy? Aren't you my boy? Oh, getting all this attention.
7-year-old Moose has been visiting since last year with his owner Susie as part of St John's Therapy Pets program. He's a golden retriever crossed with a Samoyed, giving Susie a lot more than she bargained for in size. They've been volunteering at the rest home since February last year. She says once Moose's uniform goes on, he knows what time it is.
He's really in his comfort zone. He's such a show pony and he loves being cuddled, so it's kind of the perfect job for him. It's been just really nice to see him sort of interacting with a different group of people and seeing how gentle he is and how he just kind of has the ability to light them up.
For over 30 years, St John has been bringing furry friends to bedsides and classrooms around the country as part of their Therapy Pets program. Volunteers and their pets spend time in rest homes, hospitals and schools to help people who are lonely and unwell or children with learning disabilities. National Community Care Manager Julie Taverner says it's a very special program.
It's a connection for a lot of people in rest homes. They may, it makes me emotional thinking about it. They may have had their own pets and they're in a rest home and they can no longer have a pet. Moose has become like the pet, I guess the adopted pet or the grandchild for some of these people. So it's a really special connection.
Once a volunteer has signed up, pets like Moose are usually good to go on their visits. Most of the time they're a great match, but often puppies are out of the question.
Even some of the older dogs, as they age, their temperaments can change. So we do an assessment. So there's a recruitment process we go through, police vetting for our volunteers, and then an assessment of the pet.
And the pets don't have to be dogs, they even have horses involved. With COVID's interruptions, the rest home has been a lonely place at times. Now Moose is allowed back in. It's the highlight of the week.
He'll come up and give you a kiss right on the nose, He's just lovely and I love him.
We used to have a dog called Blade and he was a big dog. He was big and strong.
He's a beautiful dog and he's very friendly. He's lovely.
All the love from residents means Moose has been getting wider.
I think he put on like 2 or 3 kgs after we started coming here last year because they just save him their morning tea. So I think today he's had 2 scones and a piece of banana cake already.
But the nature of the rest home means his friends come and go, which can be confusing.
We've had a few of his friends that have passed away, which has been really sad because he sort of knows his way around and he knows whose room's who, and he knows the people that save him morning tea and those that don't. So he still tries to go into their rooms to say hello, which is a little bit heartbreaking.
I just love you coming in, and I heard you bark this morning, but I thought I'd missed you.
The program is in huge demand and St John is hoping to expand to other parts of the country, but they need volunteers to make up the numbers, with Upper Hutt and Wellington in dire need of pets.
Ready?
If the joy Moose brings is anything to go by, it's time well spent for owners and their pets.
If you were listening on radio, you can catch that absolutely gorgeous story. The video version will be online. It was filmed by Marika Habazi. If you need a virtual cuddle from Moose, that's where you'll find it. He's doing great work. And after 6, we will have more on the missiles in Poland and the situation in Ukraine.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō. I'm Evie Ashton. Poland's government has appealed for calm after 2 people were killed by a missile that landed near the border with Ukraine. President Andrzej Duda says the missile was Russian-made, but it's not clear who fired it. The BBC's diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams reports.
Poland believes the missile that landed just inside its territory was Russian. It summoned the Russian ambassador and demanded an explanation. NATO envoys are meeting today and will also want answers from Moscow. It's just the kind of dangerous spillover Western leaders have feared since Russia launched its all-out invasion in February. But no one yet knows what really happened. It seems possible it was an accident. Russia has denied all responsibility, saying the suggestion its weapons were involved was a deliberate provocation.
US President Joe Biden has met leaders of other NATO countries at the G20 summit in Indonesia to discuss the incident. Mr. Biden says they'll find out exactly what's happened and then collectively determine the next steps. Responding to questions from reporters, he said it appeared unlikely that the missile had been fired from Russia. Health officials say New Zealanders should take extra care to prevent COVID-19 after predictions of a rise in infections this summer. The Ministry of Health says COVID case numbers appear to have plateaued, but the complex mix of variants could see daily cases hit 11,000 again over the next few months. Te Whatu Ora Interim National Medical Director Pete Watson says New Zealanders should take the necessary precautions.
If you're unwell, stay home. If you're travelling, make sure you're aware of the risk COVID-19 might affect your holiday plans and plan for this in case it happens, including your own self-isolation plans. Also, make sure you have your regular medications before you go away.
Dr. Watson says vaccination, isolation, testing and self-reporting results will be crucial during the summer months. Ministers are weighing up a request from health officials for more jobs to be added to an immigration fast track, but won't make any promises. A leaked briefing shows the Health Ministry last week asked for the green list to be extended to a further 30 professions. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The advice, leaked to the ACT Party, warns of persisting workforce shortages and urges action as soon as possible. It wants another 30 jobs given a quicker road to residency, including paramedics, nurse practitioners, dentists, pharmacists and physiotherapists. ACT says the government must not drag its feet. The Immigration Minister, Michael Wood, says he is open to making changes, but is seeking further advice and can't make any commitments yet.
A convicted double murderer has admitted he often misled or lied to corrections staff while on parole. Paul Tainui raped and murdered ex-girlfriend Kimberly Schroeder in 1994. More than 20 years later, while on life parole, Tainui raped and murdered Nicole Tuxford in Christchurch in 2018. In a statement read to the coroner's court on Tainui's behalf today, he says he often misled staff into thinking he was good, especially leading up to Ms Tuxford's murder. Tainui says that included lying about drinking to avoid a recall to prison. He also persuaded corrections that he didn't need further psychiatric treatment. The government is awaiting further advice on what more it can do in response to the situation in Iran. This follows weeks of protests after the death in custody of a young woman who was detained by morality police for allegedly breaking strict hijab rules. A court in Iran yesterday issued the first death sentence to a person arrested for taking part in the protests. Acting Prime Minister Grant Robertson says it's deeply distressing.
We will continue to look for ways to provide our support to the people of Iran, but to be absolutely clear, this court decision is appalling.
Grant Robertson says the government is very worried about the state of human rights in Iran. A world-renowned University of Otago study of health and development has been awarded New Zealand's prestigious Rutherford Medal. The 50-year-old Dunedin study has been closely documenting the lives of more than 1,000 babies born in the city from 1972 to 1973. The research has had significant global impact on scientific theories about human development. The study's director of 22 years, Professor Richie Poulton, says the real heroes of the study are the participants. He says it's been a wonderful gift to have been allowed into their lives for so long. Police are reported to have raided 2 properties following a stabbing at Bexley Park in Christchurch on Monday. A man was stabbed multiple times while walking his dog. He remains in Christchurch Hospital in critical condition. The New Zealand Herald reports that police today raided 2 properties on Corhampton Street, about 500 metres from where the man was stabbed. And returning to the war in Ukraine, a Whakatane high schooler is calling on authorities to change the name of the road where the Russian embassy in New Zealand is located. 14-year-old Jasper House has written to ministers and Wellington leaders asking them to rename part of Messines Road in Karori to Volodymyr Zelensky Way after the Ukrainian president. He's also calling on them to paint a blue and yellow pedestrian crossing outside in the colours of the Ukrainian flag.
If you go onto Google Maps and look at it, there is absolutely no reason for it to be installed there because there's not even a footpath on either side. There's a little bit of symbolism behind it that I thought of. It's there to underline the pointlessness of war.
Ministers say it's a city council decision, and the council say there's a lot of red tape around changing a street name. That's the news.
Tomorrow after 1 p.m. on Afternoons with Jessie Mulligan. If things are tight, maybe you should consider one of Mary Holmes' 3 clever types of mortgages: offset mortgages, withdrawable mortgages and revolving credit mortgages. She'll explain them all. Plus, on New Zealand sporting history, they tried every sport before settling on rowing. The team, formerly known as the Ever-Swindell Twins, remember the country's expectations of them in 2004 and then going back to the Olympics as underdogs in 2008. They join me on Afternoons with Jessie Mulligan from 1 p.m. tomorrow on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile phone. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, and from Gisborne to Waded Upper. Partly cloudy, a few showers, thunderstorms and downpours possible in the afternoons and evenings. Orowhenua to Wellington, fine today. Isolated showers mainly about the ranges. Widespread showers from tomorrow afternoon, some heavy with thunderstorms inland. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Canterbury, partly cloudy. Isolated showers inland this afternoon and evening. Chance of thundery showers in Canterbury. Showers returning tomorrow morning, some heavy with thunderstorms possible inland. Westland, areas of cloud. A few showers south of the glaciers today. Isolated showers tomorrow, some heavy inland with thunderstorms possible there. Otago, Fiordland and Southland, occasional rain or showers, some heavy falls during the afternoons and evenings with a chance of thunderstorms inland. And for Rekwahu, Chatham Islands, low cloud, a few showers. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā iho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's diplomacy on a knife edge as world leaders decide what to do after missiles of unconfirmed origins landed in a Polish border town, killing 2 people. Initial reports pointed the finger at Russia, but now US President Joe Biden says the blast may not have been caused by a missile from Russia. Poland, a NATO member, has launched an investigation and is considering whether to invoke elements of NATO's collective defence treaty that regards an attack on one of its members as an attack on all. So what could happen next? In a few minutes, we'll hear from CNN White House correspondent Kevin Liptak, who is with US President Joe Biden at the G20 summit in Bali. But joining us first is University of Waikato International Law Professor Al Gillespie. Kia ora, Al. This is a pretty critical crossroads, I would imagine. What do these NATO countries need to act?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, to act, they need to be acting in consensus. So all 30 members need to agree that an armed attack has occurred. But before you get to that point, you'll probably find that Poland will request that they have a meeting to discuss whether their territorial integrity or their security has been threatened.
So it actually needs Poland to make an official request?
Yeah, they start the ball rolling. It's pretty unusual. The only time it's ever happened before was in 2001 with the terror attacks against the United States. But when it did happen and they declared an attack had happened against the NATO members, it was done within 24 hours.
So what factors will be under consideration? Obviously, Joe Biden has cast doubt on whether this missile came from Russia. What other considerations will there be?
Well, to trigger Article 5, it has to be an armed attack, and so that means that there must be an intentional armed attack. It can't be unintentional, it can't be accidental, it can't be reckless or negligent. And so you're looking for something where they intended to strike that target.
So if it's an accident, per se, then there is no basis to take action?
If there's an accident, best case scenario, the country that did it, and it could be whoever did it, would admit it, apologise and offer compensation to the Polish people who have suffered.
What options are there between doing nothing and, well, escalating to all-out war with other countries involved?
So worst case scenario, the conflict spreads over the borders, then it becomes uncontrollable. But beneath that, what you could do is you could offer some more air defence to Poland. You could put some more NATO troops forward towards the border with Russia. Some individual NATO countries may decide to give even more weapons of a different type to the Ukrainians, who could act as proxies on behalf.
Could these NATO countries see this as an opportunity, previously having, not able to directly intervene? This presents a different scenario, potentially.
This is the nightmare scenario, and this is why it's good that it needs consensus for all 30 of them to act together, because some NATO countries may be more provocative than others, but trying to get all 30 of them to agree that you need to consider it a collective defence is going to be difficult, especially if there's uncertainty over where the missile came from.
And there are obviously consequences in terms of intervening. There's potentially consequences by even just making the allegation of Russia is hitting back, saying that's a provocation, by inferring that they are responsible.
Yeah, that's right. And right now we're in a fog of war type situation, and we need to be sceptical of all information that's coming out. One thing I would suggest, though, is that they would know where it came from, because you can look at the munition itself, but also with tracking devices right now, you can see where the missiles move through the airspace, and so someone will know where it came from.
Yeah, tell us more about that, Al, because obviously Joe Biden has said the trajectory does not point to Russia.
So even with hypersonic missiles, we can now work out where they're launched from, where they're going, and theoretically where they could impact. And with air defence, you need to be able to track these missiles as they come in so that you can theoretically knock them down. So someone will probably know where it came from. It's just about a question of releasing that information. The good news is that Biden has created a plausible deniability that it came from Russia, and that should hopefully lessen the tension right now.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That is Waikato University International Law Professor Al Gillespie. Kevin Liptak is a White House correspondent travelling with US President Joe Biden, and he joins us now live from Bali, where the G20 summit is underway. All eyes on Poland, but Joe Biden says the missile is unlikely to have come from Russia. Why is that, Kevin? What evidence does he have?
Well, he seems to be basing his assessment on American intelligence, although he's not delving into what the intelligence actually says. But I do think his comments earlier today do reflect the extreme level of caution that Biden and other world officials here in G20 are going to be approaching this matter just because of the issue of the NATO Article 5. If an attack did occur on Polish soil, that could trigger the Article 5 collective treaty that's in the NATO alliance, and that would make for a major escalation in this war. And so certainly President Biden wants to be cautious on this and wants to sort of set out the ground that this might not have come from Russia. And what American officials have told me is that their intelligence on this sort of thing would actually be pretty good. They can track the trajectory of these missiles going wherever they ended up going and wherever they ended up coming from. And so that's something that the president will have discussed with his fellow G7 leaders when he convened these crisis talks earlier today. It's something that his top advisors, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, his Secretary of State Antony Blinken, will have discussed with their counterparts as well. And so I don't think that the president came out there to just say that because he wanted to say it. There is some backing to it, but of course, they want to make sure that it's nailed down, that it's 100% solid before they can say that with any sort of definitiveness going forward.
Kevin, that raises the question, if not Russia, where has this come from?
Well, I do think that's an open question, and it's something that the leaders will want to be talking about. One thing that they have said, and that the polls have said, is that the missile was Russian-made, and so that would lead you to look at what other countries have Russian-made missiles. Now, the country in the region that is currently firing Russian-made missiles, aside from Russia, is Ukraine, and so that does lead to the question of whether this could be a Ukrainian-fired missile that went astray as they were working to defend their own territory. Just candidly, that is an option, a possibility that's being explored among intelligence agencies and among the leaders who are here at the G20 summit, but none of those leaders have said for sure that that could be what happened.
So you mentioned that they have been in crisis talks there today. Have other world leaders spoken out? What has the reaction been?
Well, you have heard from other foreign governments, at least, talking about, solidarity with Poland at this moment. You've heard from the Canadian Prime Minister who spoke with his counterparts, the French President Emmanuel Macron speaking also to other leaders in Europe, and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz spoke with the President of Poland and expressed his condolences for the 2 deaths that were a result of this blast. When they were speaking with each other in that room in these emergency talks earlier today, it was President Biden who brought them together at his hotel here in Bali. He was the one who was leading these talks, but these other leaders are also brought to the table their own conversations with officials in the region. So this will be an ongoing conversation as the leaders depart here in the coming hours and fly back to their capitals. Some of them are also traveling onward to the APEC summit in Thailand, but this will be the dominant conversation among the world leaders as they depart here later today.
Thank you for joining us, Kevin. That's Kevin Liptak, who's a White House correspondent, joining us live from Bali there, where the G20 summit is underway, where leaders have been meeting about the situation in Poland and the war in Ukraine. Police are outside 2 houses near where a man was repeatedly stabbed in Christchurch. The man was attacked while walking his dog and remains in a critical condition in hospital. Police have issued a plea for sightings of a male and a female who were in the area at the time and left in a white car. Our reporter Neva Chittick joins us now. Neva, what can you see there?
Kia ora, Lisa. I'm here on Corehampton Street. There are police cars parked up the drives of two separate houses. Police cars are coming and going. There were 3 here a short time ago, and officers are standing guard in the driveway. The street isn't closed. You can still drive through. There are some children out playing in the street, just a couple of houses down, and there are a few people peeking their heads around curtains or leaning over fences to have a look at what's going on. As of right now, there doesn't appear to be any conflict. There's not been any shouting or yelling. It just seems like a normal suburban street with a couple of extra police cars.
And Neva, just talk us through this a bit more. Where are the houses in relation to where this attack happened?
They're on a street just off Pages Road, so they're only probably within about 500 metres from the entrance to the park. We have contacted police and asked whether this is related to that stabbing at all. They are yet to respond to that. They said they're still waiting for the lead on the investigation to talk to them. So as of yet, we're not sure if this is related to that stabbing. However, it is very close to where that occurred.
Thanks for the update, Neva. That's Neva Chittick, who's outside 2 houses near that park where the stabbing occurred, and there is police activity there at the moment. It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As tensions escalate in Russia's war on Ukraine, one young Kiwi says New Zealand should be doing more to condemn the conflict. The 14-year-old from Whakatane has contacted the Prime Minister and other officials to share his ideas. Our reporter Somya Medipati and cameraman Angus Drever have the story.
Jasper House wants authorities to act. He's asking them to rename a section of Messines Road in the Wellington suburb of Karori.
The section between Tiro Street and Plymouth Street to Vladimir Zelensky Way or Zelensky Way, because that part of the street has the Russian Embassy for New Zealand on it.
That's right. He wants the street that the Russian embassy is on renamed after the Ukrainian president. And despite there being no footpaths, he's also calling for a new pedestrian crossing to be painted in front of the embassy in the colours of the Ukrainian flag.
There is absolutely no reason for it to be installed there because there's not even a footpath on either side. There's a little bit of symbolism behind it that I thought of. It's there to underline the pointlessness of war.
So what do locals think?
Yeah, 100%, definitely, totally. Full support to him.
Well, seeing the Russian embassy is up there, that could be a good thing. Yep. Something in the favour. I know Messines is historical too. I think there's value in that name as well.
I suppose it's up to the Ukraine people if they'd like that, and I don't know, hopefully the Russian people get a say in it too.
I quite like the idea that it's named after a battle in the First World War. I hadn't thought about Zelensky. I think actually teaching the Russians a lesson might be a good idea.
And on the pedestrian crossing?
There's only a footpath on one side. It's a pedestrian crossing to nowhere. Someone will get killed. No, I don't think so. Change the name.
Yeah, if I was Ukrainian, I'd be into it.
Totally. We need to show our support for them. I think people do need to step up a bit and just show that we're not going to tolerate this.
I like that idea. I mean, you see the flags around town that people have put up, and there's stickers all around that are yellow and blue. I think that painting the street outside would be an awesome idea.
Jasper contacted multiple ministers and the Wellington Mayor and Deputy Mayor, but is yet to hear back. Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta brushed off the suggestion.
Oh, look, I'm not getting involved in that. It's not a matter for my attention.
Wellington Central MP Grant Robertson says it's a decision for the City Council.
You know, I certainly support us doing what we can for the people of Ukraine. I guess my focus is on the kinds of things we announced yesterday about getting resources on the ground. I'll be interested to hear what Wellington City have got to say about that.
City Councillor Nicola Young says she thought it was great fun when a prankster changed the street sign to read Zelensky Way earlier this year, but says there's a lot of red tape to changing street names officially.
We normally don't name things after people until they're dead, because sometimes people's careers change. I'll give you an example, and this is nothing about Mr. Zelensky, but Mugabe, when he came into power in Zimbabwe, was a hero, and then he went from hero to zero.
Nicola Young says it's also important not to forget the thousands of New Zealanders who were injured and the 700 who died in the Messines battle, which the road is named after.
People in the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou have clashed with police after breaking a compulsory COVID lockdown. The city is facing one of the worst outbreaks of the virus in China since the pandemic began, and strict policies aimed at controlling the spread of infection have sparked conflicts across the country. The BBC's Stephen McDonnell reports from Beijing.
Crowds of workers in Guangzhou's lockdown Haiju district have defied stay-at-home orders and marched through the streets, smashing COVID barriers and at one point turning over a police vehicle. They're mainly itinerant labourers who've come from other parts of China to find jobs in the city. They say that anti-COVID measures have kept them at home for weeks and they can't afford not to be paid. There've also been complaints of food shortages and skyrocketing prices. Riot police have been sent in to control the situation. The latest official factory output and retail sales figures reflect the crushing economic impact of the pandemic and the government's policy responses to it. Last Friday, officials here announced a series of minor changes which have softened some measures, sparking hope that more easing could be planned. However, the strict zero COVID approach is currently increasing tensions right across the country.
Meanwhile, there's been a thawing of relations between China and Australia, according to commentators. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Chinese President Xi Jinping have met together while at G20 in Bali. The talk's seen as a turning point for the two countries. The ABC's Matthew Doran reports.
If you're wondering how long it takes to reset a diplomatic relationship, apparently the answer is 32 minutes.
Went overtime.
Anthony Albanese meeting the Chinese president at a luxury hotel in Nusa Dua, the pair shaking hands before getting down to business.
We have had our differences, and Australia won't resolve from our interests or our values.
The list of grievances between the two countries is fairly lengthy, the Prime Minister sharing some of the issues he raised, speaking to the media shortly after the meeting. Top of the list, damaging tariffs slapped on Australian exports to China.
I put forward Australia's position when it comes to the blockages in our trading relationship.
Not that it resulted in a sudden change of heart from the Chinese president.
It was not anticipated that a meeting such as that, you get immediate declarations that I believe if people thought that would happen, then that was not realistic. But it was very constructive. It is clearly in Australia's interest to export some of the fine products that we have. It's in China's interest to receive those fine products.
Mr Albanese also raising concerns about human rights abuses in places like Xinjiang, where the Chinese government has been repeatedly accused of persecuting the Uyghur ethnic minority. And he also brought up the cases of two Australian citizens languishing behind bars in China, writer Yang Hen-jun and journalist Cheng Lei. Again, no change of direction there.
You shouldn't expect that you have a meeting like that and we put forward a position and they come up with a conclusion. That's simply not the way that the system works.
President Xi congratulated Mr Albanese on his election win in May before addressing the obvious.
In the past few years, China-Australian relations have encountered some difficulties which we do not want to see.
Using the Prime Minister's own rhetoric as a standard to be held to.
You have made a number of remarks on China-Australia relations on a number of occasions and have repeatedly said that you will deal with China-Australian relations in a mature manner. I attach great importance to your opinion.
Something the pair didn't discuss was the AUKUS pact between Australia, the US and the UK. China's been highly critical of the plan, which involves Australia acquiring a fleet of nuclear submarines. Not on the agenda with President Xi, but it likely will be with the new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as Mr Albanese meets him at the G20 today.
Now to Kenya, where a young reporter's stand-up on camera was comically crashed by an overly friendly creature. A baby elephant got more than her 15 minutes of fame when she stole the spotlight from the man with the mic. CNN's Jenny Moose has the story.
Who isn't tickled pink when they see baby elephants? But this aspiring reporter was actually tickled.
And disrupting the circle of life.
as he tried to shoot a stand-up for Kenya Broadcasting Corporation.
Save our wild species and provide a home.
Posted one commenter, "That elephant has a nose for news." Intern reporter Alvin Kaunda told Ghetto Radio he had done 10 takes trying to nail his stand-up when the elephant's trunk nailed him. "I just felt the ticklish trunk, but tried to keep my cool." The elephant is an orphan named Kindani living at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya. A keeper described her as one of the cleverest elephants he's ever met. Alvin learned a lesson I learned early on at my first job in TV.
Like my friend here.
Animals steal the show, be it pig or hippo.
She seems to like to be mocked. Okay, just kidding.
Instead of almost getting chomped, Alvin got trunked, and the pachyderm seemed to have an eye for the camera. All that exploring must have left the elephant wondering, "What a tiny trunk you have, human."
All right, in news just to hand, we have an update on the situation with the missiles in Poland. Initial findings suggest that the missile that hit Poland was fired by Ukrainian forces at an incoming Russian missile. That is a report from the Associated Press. They are saying that the missile that hit Poland was fired by Ukrainian forces and it was fired at an incoming Russian missile, consistent with President Joe Biden saying that there was doubt over whether that missile had been fired by Russia. Now a suggestion it was Ukrainian forces. That is about all we have time for this evening. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything on the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a popo tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, we'll be live in Poland with the latest on the missile strike near the Ukrainian border, so do tune in for that one from 5 a.m. this morning. Tomorrow morning. Kaua e wariwari te atatero e a mātou kōrero, and do check out all our video stories and other copy online, particularly the one about the therapy dog if you need a little bit of light relief. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a fantastic evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Investigators now believe that a missile that killed 2 people in a Polish village near the Ukrainian border was fired by Ukrainian forces. Donald Trump has described the US as a nation in decline in a speech announcing he's running for president in 2024. Ministers are weighing up a request from health officials for more jobs to be added to an immigration fast track, but won't make any promises. And police say an investigation is underway after one of its vehicles collided with a pedestrian in Hamilton today. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
Tonight on Nights, humans blasting into space, funding sources here and abroad for space entrepreneurs. Hands up. Where should we live when the coastlines creep inland? Crowd Science scours the globe for the best places. And a peanut butter baron has a new recipe book out. There'll be more in there than just peanut butter sandwiches, I expect. That's just for starters. On Nights with Karen Hay, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, ngā mihi o te pō. You're listening to Trending Now. Now it's time for The Detail, and today, will Ruapehu Alpine Lifts survive after being placed into voluntary administration? Or is this the death knell for North Island skiing?
Kia ora, I'm Emile Donovan, and this is my friend Gloria. Back in September, carving up the slopes of Mount Ruapehu like a Halloween pumpkin. But the future of this particular ski field is in jeopardy.
Well, in breaking news, Ruapehu Alpine Lifts has been put into voluntary administration.
Essentially a combination of the pressures of COVID and just really poor weather this season in terms of a lack of snow.
A group of Ruapehu shareholders and Life Pass holders says appalling governance by the board of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts is to blame for the company going into voluntary administration.
The books have also been thrown open and the liabilities of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts have come out at $44.3 million, which is a little bit more perhaps than what was expected.
So, is this a death knell for snow sports in the North Island? What's being done to save the ski field? And as the planet continues to warm and snow lines creep higher and higher, is the writing on the wall for other ski fields around the country? John Fisk is one of the 2 administrators who've taken over responsibility for the ski field. He works for PwC.
The creditors' claims are frozen at the date of our appointment, and it's our job to look at securing the assets and coming up with a plan on how they're to be dealt with, acting in the best interests of the creditors.
Right, okay. The creditors being the people to whom the company, Ruapehu Alpine Lifts, owes money at this point in time?
That's right, yes.
Okay. And so how have you and how has RAL found itself in this position?
There's no simple answer to this,
Sure.
And these sort of things build up over time. There's a whole range of circumstances that will have come into play to get to this position, but what essentially happened is the board got to a point where they couldn't be confident that they could pay their debts as they fell due. And directors have a duty in those circumstances to go into some sort of formal insolvency process if they can't see a way back from that insolvency. So that's how we got appointed. Part of our job is to look back at why did the company fail, and there's still work to be done there. But if I can summarise it, the first obvious issue has been COVID. 2 seasons where the number of visitors coming to the mountain has been massively impacted by COVID lockdowns, and particularly from the Auckland market. That has been hard.
Which Ruapehu is very reliant on.
They're reliant